Everything we thought we knew about The Chosen is about to change. Season 5 isn't just another chapter, it's a complete shift in storytelling. A season so intense that even the creators had to rethink how they portrayed Jesus' journey. It's no secret that The Chosen has been one of the most faithful adaptations of the life of Christ, but as the series approaches the darkest moments of Jesus' story, something unexpected happened. The weight of this season became so overwhelming that it forced Jonathan Rumi to confront the deepest emotional and spiritual challenges of his life. In fact, things got so real that The Chosen had no choice but to change certain elements of Jesus' story. But why? What was so intense about this season that they had to adjust the narrative? And how did this impact Jonathan Rumi, the man behind the role of Jesus? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share will completely change how you see The Chosen Season 5. From the very beginning, The Chosen has prided itself on being one of the most authentic and biblically grounded portrayals of Jesus' life. But with Season 5, the stakes are higher than ever. This is the season that covers the most heartbreaking and gut-wrenching moments of Jesus' journey. The betrayal, the arrest, the trial, and eventually the crucifixion. And it turns out, this wasn't just emotionally taxing for the actors and crew, it was so intense that they had to rethink the entire storytelling approach. The creators realized that presenting these events in the usual Chosen style, balancing historical accuracy with cinematic storytelling, wasn't enough this time. The weight of what they were about to depict was simply too great. Dallas Jenkins, the show's creator, admitted in a recent interview that the emotional toll of this season was unlike anything they had tackled before. The crucifixion of Jesus isn't just another scene. It's the moment that changed history forever. And bringing that to life on screen in a way that fully captures the raw suffering, the spiritual magnitude, and the brutal reality of what Jesus endured. That's not something you can just film like any other episode. So, they made changes, subtle but significant adjustments to how the story unfolds. Certain scenes were rewritten, some moments were intensified, while others were restructured to ensure that the emotional weight hit as hard as possible. And these changes weren't just for dramatic effect, they were necessary to convey the sheer agony of what Jesus went through. But here's where it gets even more interesting. These changes didn't just affect the script, they had a profound impact on Jonathan Rumi himself. The deeper he went into this portrayal, the more he found himself struggling under the immense pressure of embodying Jesus during his darkest hour. This wasn't just another season for him, it became something far more personal, something that shook him to his core. As The Chosen pushed further into Jesus' most agonizing moments, Jonathan Rumi found himself walking a path he never anticipated. Playing Jesus had always been a deeply emotional and spiritual experience for him, but Season 5 took it to a level he wasn't prepared for. The intensity of this season's storyline forced him to confront the sheer weight of portraying a man who was not only enduring the worst physical suffering imaginable, but also the emotional devastation of betrayal, rejection, and complete abandonment. And it wasn't just about performing these scenes, it was about feeling them, living them, and carrying them long after the cameras stopped rolling. The moment filming began for the final days of Jesus' life, something shifted in Jonathan. The emotional preparation required for these scenes was unlike anything he had ever faced before. It wasn't just about memorizing lines or hitting the right expressions. It was about embodying an unimaginable level of suffering to the point where he could barely separate himself from the role. Even seasoned actors struggle when dealing with emotionally heavy material, but what Jonathan was experiencing went beyond typical performance stress. He wasn't just acting, he was immersing himself in the pain, and it started affecting him in ways he never expected. He spoke about how certain scenes left him completely drained, mentally and spiritually exhausted, to the point where he had to step away just to process what he had just experienced. There were moments on set where he felt the crushing weight of responsibility, knowing that millions of people would be watching him portray the single most important moment in human history. And with that responsibility came fear. Fear of not doing it justice, fear of getting it wrong, fear of being consumed by the very role that had defined his career. Jonathan has always been open about how deeply playing Jesus has influenced his personal faith, but this season blurred the lines between character and reality. He found himself questioning things he had never questioned before, wrestling with the overwhelming burden of stepping into the shoes of Christ during his most agonizing hours. Even off set, he carried the emotional turmoil with him, struggling to shake the sorrow and grief that came with portraying Jesus' suffering. It became impossible to leave the role behind at the end of the day because the emotions were just too raw, too real. And as season 5 continued filming, it became clear that something had to change. Jonathan's well-being was on the line, and the show's creators knew they couldn't ignore it. That's when they made a drastic decision, one that would alter not just how The Chosen told Jesus' story, but how Jonathan would continue playing the role that had both blessed and burdened him for years. But what exactly did they change? And how did it impact the way we'll see Jesus in season 5? In the next section, we'll uncover the surprising adjustments that had to be made to protect Jonathan and preserve the integrity of The Chosen's most pivotal season yet. As season 5 progressed, the emotional weight of portraying Jesus' final days became almost unbearable, not just for Jonathan Roumie, but for the entire production. The deeper the show ventured into the crucifixion storyline, the more apparent it became that something had to change. The emotional toll wasn't just affecting the cast, it was altering the energy on set, creating an atmosphere that felt too heavy to carry for months on end. The entire production was walking a fine line between capturing the raw, devastating reality of Jesus' suffering and protecting the mental and spiritual health of the people bringing this story to life. For Jonathan, the burden of playing Jesus in these moments became more than just an acting challenge. It was something deeply personal, something that began affecting his day-to-day life in ways no one had predicted. The show's creators knew they had to take a step back and make adjustments, not only to ensure that the emotional intensity didn't overwhelm the cast, but also to maintain the integrity of The Chosen storytelling. Dallas Jenkins, the series creator, admitted in a recent interview that they faced an incredibly difficult dilemma. They wanted to remain as faithful as possible to the biblical account, but they also had to recognize the human limitations of their lead actor. Unlike other roles where actors can detach from their characters at the end of the day, Jonathan had spent years embodying Jesus. By the time season 5 began filming, it wasn't just a role anymore. It was a deeply spiritual and psychological experience that had taken root in his own life. The problem wasn't just the physical demands of the crucifixion scenes, though those were grueling enough. It was the mental and emotional strain of reenacting Jesus' final hours. The loneliness, the betrayal, the sheer agony of knowing that even his closest followers would abandon him. Every glance, every word, every moment in these scenes carried an unimaginable weight, and Jonathan felt every single bit of it. It reached a point where even when the cameras weren't rolling, he found himself stuck in a state of sorrow, unable to shake the emotions of what he had just filmed. Recognizing this, the creative team behind The Chosen made a bold decision. They began reworking certain aspects of how Jesus' story would be presented in season 5. They weren't changing biblical events, but they were adjusting the way these moments were captured, choosing to shift the focus in certain scenes to prevent the emotional overload from becoming too much. One of the biggest changes involved how the show would portray Jesus' final interactions with his disciples before his arrest. In earlier drafts of the script, the scenes were even more intense, drawing out the anguish in a way that, while powerful, risked becoming unbearable both for Jonathan and for the audience. The filmmakers decided to take a more nuanced approach, emphasizing Jesus' inner strength and divine resolve alongside his suffering, rather than focusing solely on the brutality of his final hours. This not only helped ease some of the emotional pressure on Jonathan, but also allowed the show to maintain a sense of hope even in its darkest moments. Another major change came in the way the crucifixion itself was structured. Originally, the plan was to depict it in a way that was as visceral and excruciatingly detailed as possible, something that would immerse viewers in the sheer horror of what Jesus endured. But, as filming began, it became clear that this approach was too overwhelming, even for those involved in the production. The physical demands of these scenes alone were extreme. Jonathan spent hours on the cross, enduring the physical strain of being suspended in place, his body exhausted, his mind racing with the reality of what his character was going through. He later revealed in an interview that even though he knew it was all just a reenactment, there were moments when he genuinely felt abandoned, as if he were experiencing just a fraction of the true loneliness and pain that Jesus must have felt. It was in those moments that he realized he couldn't carry this alone. The show's creators saw this as well, which is why they chose to frame the crucifixion in a way that would be just as emotionally impactful without forcing Jonathan to relive the trauma over and over again during filming. Instead of relying on excessive brutality, The Chosen opted for a more spiritual, reflective approach, using lighting, camera angles, and emotional performances from other characters to convey the depth of Jesus' suffering. This allowed the scene to retain its emotional power while also preserving Jonathan's mental well-being. And it wasn't just Jonathan who was affected. The entire cast and crew felt the weight of these moments. Some actors reported feeling emotionally drained just from being present on set. Watching as these scenes unfolded, even Dallas Jenkins admitted that directing these moments took a toll on him, forcing him to wrestle with his own emotions in ways he hadn't expected. It became clear that this season was unlike any other, not just in terms of storytelling, but in the emotional and spiritual challenges it brought to everyone involved. But perhaps the most surprising change wasn't in the script or the cinematography. It was in Jonathan Roumie himself. For years, playing Jesus had strengthened his faith, deepening his understanding of Christ in ways he never imagined. But Season 5 forced him to confront something he had never fully processed before: the cost of stepping into this role. For the first time, he openly questioned whether he could continue playing Jesus beyond the end of the series. The emotional exhaustion was real, and the deeper he went into the pain of Jesus' story, the harder it became to separate himself from the suffering. It was a painful realization, but one that ultimately led him to an important decision, one that would shape not just his future, but the future of The Chosen. As Season 5 approached its most grueling moments, Jonathan knew he needed to find a way to navigate this experience without losing himself in the process. But the question remained: could he continue? Could he push through the immense emotional burden of this role, or was it time to start preparing for the end? In the next section, we'll explore the shocking decision Jonathan Roumie made regarding his future with The Chosen, a decision that left fans heartbroken, but one that might have been inevitable all along. As Season 5 pushed deeper into Jesus' final days, the weight of the role became more than just an artistic challenge for Jonathan Roumie. It became a spiritual and emotional battle, unlike anything he had ever experienced. The line between his personal faith and his on-screen portrayal of Christ had always been thin, but now it was vanishing entirely. He wasn't just playing Jesus, he was feeling the agony of betrayal, the suffocating sorrow of abandonment, and the crushing loneliness that came with knowing the end was near. The emotional cost of fully stepping into Jesus' suffering was becoming almost too much to bear. While the changes made to the script helped to alleviate some of the overwhelming intensity of certain scenes, there was no way to completely remove the emotional toll that this season demanded. Every day on set, Jonathan found himself mentally and spiritually drained, struggling to find the balance between honoring the role and protecting his own well-being. He had never faced anything like this before, and for the first time, he was forced to confront a terrifying thought. What if he couldn't keep doing this? What if The Chosen had pushed him past his limits? Up until this point, Jonathan had embraced the role of Jesus with a deep sense of purpose. He had spoken openly about how playing Christ had transformed his personal faith, strengthening his connection to God in ways he never expected. But now, as he faced the grueling reality of portraying Jesus' suffering in its rawest form, something inside him began to shift. He started questioning whether he could continue carrying this burden, whether he could keep stepping into the role without losing himself entirely. The emotional exhaustion wasn't just lingering on set, it was following him home. He spoke about struggling to sleep, unable to shake the feelings of sorrow and anguish that filming had left imprinted on him. Even in moments of rest, his mind would drift back to the crucifixion, the betrayal, the isolation. It wasn't just acting anymore. It was something far deeper, something he wasn't sure he could keep enduring. As the days of filming dragged on, those closest to him started to notice the toll it was taking. Fellow cast members spoke about how Jonathan seemed quieter, more withdrawn, almost as if the weight of the role had started to consume him. Even Dallas Jenkins, who had worked closely with Jonathan since the beginning of The Chosen, admitted that he had never seen him like this before. It was clear that something had changed, and everyone began to wonder the same thing. Was this going to be Jonathan Rumi's final season as Jesus? The idea seemed impossible at first. Jonathan had become the face of The Chosen, the heart of the series, the very reason why so many fans connected so deeply with the show. To imagine The Chosen without him seemed unthinkable. But as filming continued, the truth became undeniable. Jonathan was reaching his breaking point. Then came the moment that confirmed what many had feared. In a private conversation with Dallas Jenkins and the producers, Jonathan opened up about just how much this season had affected him. He admitted that, for the first time since stepping into the role of Jesus, he was seriously considering stepping away. He wasn't sure how much more of this he could take. The exhaustion, the emotional burden, the spiritual weight, it was all becoming too much. He expressed his concerns about his own well-being, questioning whether he could continue without it taking a permanent toll on him. It was a painful conversation, one that no one had been prepared for. But at the same time, it was something that couldn't be ignored. The Chosen had always been more than just a show. It was a deeply spiritual journey for everyone involved. And if that journey was starting to harm the person at the very center of it, something had to change. The decision wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. As filming neared its final stretch, Jonathan and the production team reached a difficult but necessary conclusion. Jonathan Rumi's time as Jesus was coming to an end. While he would continue to portray Christ through the remainder of The Chosen's original run, it became clear that his involvement beyond the main series would be limited. In a later interview, Dallas Jenkins confirmed that Jonathan would not be reprising his role in any potential future spin-offs or extended projects. Instead, he would shift to a smaller role within the Chosen universe, lending his voice to the upcoming animated Chosen series, but stepping away from physically portraying Jesus on screen. The news sent shockwaves through the fan base. For years, Jonathan had been synonymous with The Chosen. His portrayal of Jesus had touched millions, resonating with audiences in a way that few performances ever do. To think that he would one day no longer be part of the show felt almost impossible to process. Fans took to social media, expressing their heartbreak over the news, struggling to come to terms with the idea of a Chosen without Jonathan Rumi at its center. Some questioned whether the show could even continue without him, while others understood that this was a necessary decision for his own well-being. Jonathan himself remained candid about the transition. In an emotional message to fans, he expressed his deep gratitude for the journey he had been on, acknowledging how much playing Jesus had meant to him. But he also made it clear that this was the right choice. He spoke about the need to protect his mental and spiritual health, emphasizing that as much as he loved the role, he couldn't allow it to consume him completely. His words carried a deep sense of finality, making it clear that while he would always cherish his time as Jesus, the time had come to step away. The response from fans was overwhelming. While many were devastated by the news, there was also an outpouring of support and understanding. People recognized the immense challenge of portraying Jesus, especially in such an emotionally demanding way. They understood that, in the end, Jonathan had to do what was best for him. The answers to these questions would determine the future of the series. But one thing was clear. Season 5 had changed everything. Not just for Jonathan Rumi, but for The Chosen itself. As the show neared the most crucial moments of Jesus' story, it was also approaching the most uncertain chapter in its own history. And with Jonathan preparing to step away, the fate of The Chosen was now more uncertain than ever. In the next section, we'll explore how The Chosen plans to move forward without Jonathan Rumi at the center, what changes are being made, how the show's creators are adjusting their approach, and whether The Chosen can truly continue without the man who had become the face of Jesus for millions. The future of the series hangs in the balance, and what happens next will determine whether The Chosen can maintain its impact or if it will be forced to make even more drastic changes. With Jonathan Rumi preparing to step away after The Chosen's final seasons, the biggest question remains: can the show continue to captivate audiences without the actor who has become the very face of Jesus? His departure marks a turning point, not just for The Chosen, but for the millions of fans who have connected with his portrayal on a deeply personal level. While his voice will remain in the animated Chosen series, the reality is undeniable. The emotional core of the show is shifting. Will the remaining cast be able to carry the weight of these final, most heartbreaking moments? Will The Chosen find a way to evolve without losing what made it so powerful in the first place? Dallas Jenkins and the production team are faced with an unprecedented challenge. They've always emphasized authenticity and emotional depth. But can they maintain that without Jonathan fully in the role? Some believe The Chosen is bigger than one actor, that its impact will continue regardless of casting changes. Others worry that Jonathan's departure signals the beginning of the end. One thing is certain, Season 5 is the most pivotal moment in the show's history, both on-screen and behind the scenes. As The Chosen prepares to bring Jesus' final moments to life, the stakes have never been higher. Will this be the season that cements its legacy, or will the changes be too much for audiences to accept? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear, this is the moment that changes everything. What do you think? Can The Chosen survive without Jonathan Rumi? Let me know in the comments.